we have, like we always do. We appreciate you being on time, and got a lot to cover tonight. Got a great session. So hopefully the cousins will come and they'll jump right in and we'll keep moving forward. Okay, let's begin. Again, we thank you and welcome you, as this is one of the last few classes, the next to the last one, if you will, for the Nashville Bond Education Program. It's been an amazing ride. We've got just an awesome experience. We're learning some great things about building capacity in your firm, and we've heard some great conversations from our bond experts. So those that are taking advantage of the one-on-ones that you're having, it's showing value, and they're excited about some of the things that A, you're doing, B, the potential to do. So we just appreciate that. Just on behalf of our partner, if you will, the United States Department of Transportation, they're excited about what's going on in Nashville. We meet with them on a monthly basis and give them updates on our activities. So we're just looking forward to being able to move forward with you in the next level of review, which is a more one-on-one kind of thing. And as prayers have it, perhaps we can even have a quasi face-to-face at some point later in the year. So we're excited about that. We've got some amazing conversations and plans going on with our stakeholders. So I'll leave that on the table for you to kind of think about. So we're going to just begin the presentation now. Ms. Beth, you have it for a quick audit. Ms. Beth, you're on mute.
Okay. Hi there, everyone. We have on the roll today, attendance is Carlo Hyde.
Here.
Cliff Steger. Emmanuel Toombe.
Yeah, I'm here.
Juliana Wren.
Yes, I'm here.
Remberto
I'm
Zavala.
here.
Daryl Jackson.
I'm here.
And
Cliff, I love your picture. That's amazing. That's great. One of these days, I'm gonna grow up.
we
and
have
get
one
a good
person
picture
waiting
like
to get
that.
in, but that's not on our staff. We have myself, Mr. Hebrew Dixon, our witty intern, Miss Ashley Aguilar is on, and our marketing contractor is Miss Janice Deutsch, and our speaker today is Mr. Ronald Mangum, instructor.
Absolutely. Before we get into the meat of it, I don't know if we really, you see the word witty. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm gonna take this opportunity. Miss Ashley is an amazing student. She's come in and joined our team and just added immense value. But family, witty is Women in Transportation Initiative. It's not a new thing with USDOT, but it's something that you're gonna hear more about. They're asking for updates, and they're looking for some really advancing in the activities that we have done in the past. It's a new lens, if you will, new interest in it. And so we're just excited. Now, Miss Ashley may not be a contractor one day. She may not be, but we hope by her interface with us and all the conversations we have that perhaps the path forward, the channel, if you will, to a career in transportation would be something she would highly consider, because that's something that we would be proud to be able to help her do. So just want to make sure you knew who she was and what witty meant. So without any further conversation, let's begin the introductions. Now, first we have Mr. Ronald Mangum. Now, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, Mr. Mangum, I've known a very long time. He's an amazing processor. He's going to give you some amazing things in project management. He is a broad array of project experience in industries ranging from telecommunications, equipment design, manufacturing, to commercial construction. In project management roles that include, he held new technology system development, ground up new construction, airport renovations. His ability to manage the sequence of a project coupled with strong client relationships. Let me say that again. Sequencing of projects coupled with strong client relationships makes him a positive addition to any construction project team. So Mr. Mangum, we're just excited to you being with us today and begin the presentation.
Okay. All right, you can cue up my slides if you could.
All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, everyone. Since over the last, I'll say over the last 15 to 20 years, the term project management has been used in various levels of effectiveness. At the end of the day, project management is simply the art of getting things done. It has gotten so sophisticated. There is a international organization called the Project Management Institute that has been created that actually provides certifications for individuals in project management with a pretty rigorous study and examination process that people leverage to do lots of things. I know I've considered it. Today is not a Project Management Institute class. It's more practical and applied. But I did want to put out there that this discipline is sophisticated. And as you grow your business, one of the things, a decision point ought be how immersive you will be in project management tools versus acquiring the revenue and the overhead capability that you can get a good project management person on your team. They will be immeasurable in helping you achieve your goals and allowing you to have oversight over your entire business and not get tied down into the weeds outside of crisis management and maintaining, again, strong client relationships. This slide that you're looking at is a project management slide, Institute slide, which talks about, I'm not going to walk through it. This is available to you as a handout, but just talks about different phases of the project, the flow, and a definition of what each one of those steps in the flow requires. At the end of the day, if you whittle that all down, there are 5 phases to project management in general from a global sense. That's initiation, which is when the project is defined and named. Then you have planning. That's where scope, cost, duration, quality, the communications and risks with your client and your customer, which is really one of the most important things in the planning phase, is who do you have to ensure is satisfied with the outcome of your project. In your own business, if you're running a project inside of your business, because a project is simply, again, the art of getting things done, and a project is defined, could be defined as anything. In fact, taking this course, all segments could be considered your project management project, in that you're being exposed to all of the different elements in your bond education program. So planning is step 2. Implementation, this is where the rubber meets the road, where you have your schedule, your milestones, and communicating the status for your project and your updates. Again, keeping your client/customers informed on where things are and how you are progressing against the plan. 4th is monitoring and control, and that's making sure your plan is working and initiating corrective actions early. You don't want to wait until things go south. You want to get in front of things, and with your monitoring and control, you'll have the systems and communication channels in place, so you'll get feedback early. And really, the question as an executive or running your own business is asking questions on, are we moving it successfully against the plan? If not, why? And you don't want to always be the one to come up with the solutions. You want your people who respond to you and answer to you to be able to provide you solutions, and you can evaluate those recommendations as needed. And then finally, people forget, you did the project done, and at the end, you have to close the project, meaning all the systems and products are tested and delivered on time. You've trained your customer or the end user, and the customer signs off on it and says they're satisfied. And don't ever forget to take photographs to memorialize your activities. In fact, you can do that at the end, but you really need to do that all along the way as you reach significant milestones, as you need to take photographs, memorialize those. They will help from a historical standpoint, and often they will be useful in helping you resolve conditions where you can say, hey, this is where we were, this is how that looked. You know, you did work at night, and the next day you get a call saying stuff is all torn up. If you had photos, you can show how you left it. And then that does identify that there was some third party responsible for disruption of the work that you did. So those are the 5 phases. Even when you look at this map that's on the screen, it all gets down to initiating the project, either on your own as something internal or delivering for a client, planning that with customer involvement, implementing the plan, monitoring and controlling the plan, and closing out the project at the end to make sure all the end users and stakeholders are satisfied. You always can get some lessons learned that you can use that to feed back into, future projects. And if you're in a real challenging situation where you have, 3 or 4 projects going on at the same time, it magnifies the significance of being able to have a hand on those 5 inputs so that you know where each project is against the plan and always against the budget. Your checkpoint always will be what's the impact on cost, time, and schedule. All right, next slide. All right, so I talked about this only briefly, project selection. When I talked about the 5 phases, that's really project initiation. This is all upfront in the beginning. I did want to kind of briefly roll through the warning signs. If you're involved in a negotiation with a customer or a big RFP, these warning signs don't mean don't do the work. These mean that you need to just increase your efforts to make sure that, for instance, complicated contract terms, don't make any assumptions, work through those, ask questions of the client, particularly if there's a request for information period where you can send in those questions. But be cognizant of the kinds of questions you ask, not revealing your means and methods that might give someone an advantage in knowing how you're going to do the work. You want to stick to the question and what risks that you're trying to mitigate or understand if they exist or don't exist. And if they do exist, what's the magnitude of those risks? Again, broad or vague contracts, which is just the opposite of complicated, meaning it's too loose. You may want to put some constraints and some conditions to better define. One of the simplest ones is, here is my price based on the drawings dated XYZ, so that you can make sure that your price proposal is sized up against a specific set of documentation, and don't, I've been in situations where people keep asking for different price scenarios. Well, take out this, well, don't do that. And each time when I responded to that, I said, this is the proposal absent XYZ, or this includes XYZ, because that sometimes, unfortunately, that's a strategy to create confusion and get a number that's favorable to the end user, but not favorable to you. And then the other are dual signatures on checks. That can often get complicated. And one of the big ahs when you're reading contracts, the whole liquidated damages, be cognizant of that. Sometimes those could be minimum, or if you're supposed to deliver this project on or before June 1st, and you don't have your documentation, you haven't kept the customer up to date, you don't know where your weak points are, and you've not initiated corrective action in a very effective way, you wind up, it's May 31st, you're supposed to be done June 1st, And the liquidated damages for every day that you're late past the first could be hundreds of thousands. Well, not generally, it's not that much, but it could be thousands of dollars per day. And that is going to immediately eat into any anticipated profitability that you anticipated on the project. And you know, obviously, when you're putting a price proposal together, if you have to have insurance in there, you need to pass that cost on to your price proposal and make it clear that's not necessarily G&A, things that you're going to eat. If they have unique liability criteria that you need to, that will increase your cost of doing business for that customer, that's something that you want to talk about. You don't want to surprise them at the end. You know, you have a customer that's ready to give you the project and you say, oh, by the way, it's going to be, I've need $10,000 more to cover my insurance costs, and you haven't greased the skids on that. And that's where the communication comes in. Generally, a lot of contracts, particularly in the federal space, have a blackout period where you really need to concentrate those kinds of questions and comments to the procurement official, so that you stay away from any violations of the federal procurement practices, and talking to others, even if it's a simple question that can typically create a situation where you being considered for that project will be thrown out. Next slide, please. Obviously, let's say you put your price together. The key thing is, when do I need to start and when do I need to be done? And then you fill in all of the, I'll call it work breakdown structure items that you need to achieve to get to that end date. And I call that buckets of work. And that's really the planning. You really have to look at, what is it going to take for me to get this project done? And quite honestly, if you are involved in a bid and you don't know or can't, with the assistance of your own team, or if you're in a JV or partnering teaming arrangement, if your partners can't help you see from the beginning to the end, that may be a red flag that this may not be the right project for your team. The worst thing you could do is have a plan that's not feasible and try to execute it, because those will show up right away. And in addition to liquidated damages, you can get a contract terminated for cause if you're not performing based on the commitments that are set out in your contract. Next slide, please. Costing, when I talked about the whole deal of the work breakdown structures, you know, what does it take to get from the beginning to the end? What resources am I going to need? Am I going to need subcontractor support? If you are a painting company and you wind up getting a project that's going to require drywall or new base molding material, or it's going to require ceiling tile work, you need to include some reliable teammates that you can call upon to help give you pricing for that information. And as you get more sophisticated, if you keep good records, often you can base future work upon work that you've done in similar arenas. And it's not so much you may use those numbers in a future bid opportunity, but when you get pricing from others, that may give you a baseline to judge if you're being, if the proposals you're getting from outside contractors are in alignment with your past experience based on other projects. So the costing activity, and that means your G&A and understanding your numbers, which have been discussed with you in a previous module on what that your cost structure and the cost of you doing business is, and the cost of you delivering the project. The whole idea is you got your fixed costs, you've got your margin, you've got your profit margin, and you need to be watching those almost on a daily basis. And there's software out there now that allows you to do that. And with tools, with your handheld devices, you can get fairly real-time information. And as soon as you, in your reporting structure, get wind of something that doesn't seem right, do not assume it'll work itself out or somebody else has it. You have to ask the right questions and make sure, well, you know, like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. It's not that bad. Give me a little time. Those are warning signs, because, you know, a lot of activity in the transportation space, we're not talking huge profit margins. So you've priced a job to run like a Swiss watch. And if it's not running like a Swiss watch, every hiccup is actually increasing the likelihood of you not hitting the numbers that you set out in the project and your costing structure. Next slide, please. Again, the project management domain is huge. Techniques of project management. I think of all of the things here, daily reporting is key, written daily reporting. Even on top of that is verified photos, particularly if you're in Nashville or Memphis and your project site is here in Atlanta, you're gonna want to have some daily feedback to let you know how things are going, things that went correct, things that did not go correct, and the proposed corrective action to prevent it from reoccurring. Those are the kinds of things that you want. But here are some of the pulse points to give you, you know, almost if you had, what do they call it? Your dashboard, you wanna, the first bullet should be on your dashboard. The second bullet, estimated versus your actual costs. Invoices, which is your AP and your AR. And again, the daily reporting. Those are all things that you want to have set up so that you get those on a project by project basis, that you know where you are at all times. Next slide, please.
Ronald, could I ask you a question here?
Absolutely. Who's speaking?
Cliff.
Hey, Cliff, how are you?
Good, thanks. I've been offered an invitation to do a owner's rep project. It's a project management as an owner's rep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with a nonprofit organization that's trying to restore some damaged property.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at doing a design build, but they don't have the expertise to keep track on the project in-house themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking for an owner's rep to act as a project manager.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, it sounds like, yeah, you would be keeping them out of trouble and watching the project to make sure it stays on track and that sort of thing. But they've hit me with an agreement that says they want me to have general liability and even professional liability insurance with it. So some of the things that you're saying are flags for me to look at with
Mm-hmm.
Getting involved with this.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you just mentioned was some of the steps that things that you need to be daily activities that you keep track of and reports and that sort of thing. I was just curious if you knew of a software package that one could use to manage the project, that kind of project with, so that you would keep track of all of those daily kinds of activities and reports and have a way of managing them. RFIs that will come back and forth to the owner,
Mm-hmm.
Pay applications, daily logs, and that sort of thing. Do you know of a software package that one could use to manage that kind of project?
Yeah, I do. But from an owner's rep standpoint, I think the ones that always have come to mind right off the top of my head are like Sage, which may be too robust, but I'll make a note to follow back up with Hebrew and his team to provide some suggestions on other ones, because there are packages that are tailored for I'll call it the nonprofit environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, even though you don't want to everybody wants to hit their numbers, nonprofit or for-profit. And the nonprofit, the sensitivity to certain aspects are different. And you want that, you don't want to wind up trying to customize it on the fly. So I'll try to software.
Right.
I'll try to get back to you on that. Hebrew, did you want to add?
Just to season a little bit. Great answer, Ron. It depends on the timing. If they're saying they want to do a project in the next 30 to 60 days, my counsel is that you don't have time to learn the software and be proficient in it to be able to be, the one that is answerable to the issues. The other side of the coin is that, and Ron mentioned it about the robust of the, how large or the robustness of the project. If it's something on the minor side, I mean, I can, Excel is our friend, and it's all about knowing the costs. Makes you work a little harder. And there are also some smaller programs that just do DCRs, daily construction reports, and take pictures. That just does that. So you may want to look at compartmentalizing some of the things that could make you more efficient. It just depends on how the agreement looks. So we got to talk offline. Ms. Beth can set up a counseling session for you, and then Ron can share some of his thoughts, and now we can have a sidebar about it. But great question. I'm glad you shared it with us this evening.
Yeah, it can be made to work. So that's a good point.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Sorry to disrupt you.
Oh, no. So types of, I think on this slide, it's fairly evident, but types of costs to monitor are, all of your big buckets: cost of material, overtime, storage, leakage, any, stuff is walking off your job site. The whole issue here is, if you had $10,000 allocated and, you're at 5 and you're 30% done with the project, then there's a sign something is not going right. And in fact, you don't want $10,000 of that cost. You don't even want to hit that number in reality, even if you have it budgeted. You want to find out what's going on. So that, and one of the key things for project managers is that people will get people's attention is asking questions, particularly of the owner of the problem. If it's the QC guy and you're saying that there's leakage on the project, where you say, well, why? And where is everything stored? Do you have a key to that? Who has a key? You don't need the names. You just want, you're pushing, you are accountable for that. And I, as the owner of this project, I need you to have answers to those questions. And at the end of the day, and Hebrew will enforce it, if somebody's not singing the right song early, one of the best things you can do is make a change. Because people, if you see it and sense it, others will too. And you want, even in this opportunity you talked about before, as the owner's rep, one of your jobs will be to have a team. So even with the project management software, there is no time in 30 days to learn it, but you could get somebody on your team to give you an hourly rate to be on your team who has specific expertise in that, and they can do that work for you. You follow what I'm saying? So that suffocates some folks because it's your project, it's your contract, so you think you have to do everything, but not necessarily. If if you're doing it, they're going to charge you a price with a little profit on it, and then you're going to charge the client some price with a little profit. You got to be aware of all of that. But often some strategy is you don't ever want to lowball it, but also things generally change, and then it's where change orders come in, and that's where you have an opportunity to not make up money. Don't ever look at it like that, where that's add additional revenue to your project. So next slide, please. Next one. Job site meetings, key piece. This is all about that communication. Even if you're remote, that's having a specific time of each week to have a meeting and have all of the parties involved around the table, pre-COVID, virtually in a COVID environment. But that's key. Every piece of work should have an owner, and that person should report progress and impediments to their progress, and provide you some opportunity to review solutions that they propose. The worst thing you want to do is just have everybody tell you what the problem is and leave it up to you to sort through and navigate through all of the issues. You need them to do that and lay on the table, and be cognizant of the fact when they lay stuff on the table that they didn't do that in a vacuum. As I've been in an environment where, you know, as an electrical contractor, we were doing the work, we were meeting the schedule, and then the carpeting guy decided to get his work done early. Well, we didn't have our floor boxes in. So that required, that made our job 75% more difficult because we couldn't work free of the carpet. We had to navigate around that because obviously anything we damaged, we were going to have to pay for. And they made that decision in a vacuum, not recognizing the impact it would have on us and generally everybody else that had to work on the floor with their lifts and everything else. So it really created quite a mess that you know, the owner was kind of like, y'all need to work it out. And it was not easy. Next slide. And we just talked about this a little bit, Cliff, and the rest of the team, is that often the customer may come with you and say, well, you know, I only wanted one access door to that space, but now I need 2 access doors. Or you could say one of the areas for change orders arise in a situation called unforeseen conditions. Let's say you had to do a rehab in a space, and based on the information provided to you, there was no asbestos, and you wind up, there's a floor in there that you have to get tested because it has to be removed. But if you remove asbestos, disrupt it, you hit a whole bunch of regulations and penalties. So when you have these unforeseen conditions, you want to identify there are things the customer may bring to you, and there are things that you may bring to the customer. And sometimes if there are items of convenience, you could say, hey, you may not want to do this. However, this may make it easier to access the space. It may make it more comfortable for the workers in this particular environment. You know, XYZ, you don't want to come across as a salesman that you're trying to upsell and get more money in your pocket, but you are wanting to solve a problem that that you didn't foresee. And if there's something the customer wants you to evaluate, you want to be fair and honest with your price on that. But at the same time, you know, nothing's for free. You do nothing without the customer's approval. You need to be firm but diplomatic about, I'll take that under consideration and I'll give you a price for that, but we will not be able to do that work until we, you know, determine that you've approved it. You know, those are kind of the, you know, walking, talking diplomacy that you and you need to impart that on your representatives on site, all the way down to the, you know, the sweeper. Nobody does anything outside of scope for free, or at least, you know, at nothing less. And versus them coming off and saying, no, we're not doing that. You can say, well, I need to inform my supervisor, and someone will get back to you. That's also a diplomatic way to get that done. All right, next slide. Generally in the bidding documents, your whole quality control, and I'll include safety requirements, are set out in the contract. Depending on how large your project is, you may have to have a designated quality control representative, and you may also have to have a dedicated safety representative. And particularly on the safety side, there's OSHA training that is required, and there are incident statistics that individual needs to keep and have on site. And because your EMR, and I think you guys all know what that is something that you need to manage that can make your cost of doing business go up and sometimes can disqualify you from jobs. I know one of the clients we work with here in Atlanta, if you have an EMR over 1.0, it requires a huge meeting, which in itself is embarrassing. And there are extenuating circumstances, you know, one of the employees had a terrible accident. Doesn't mean you can't talk your way through those, but if your EMR is high because of failure to exercise discipline and control over your workers, that's a different thing. And even more so when you have vehicles, individuals are driving vehicles for the company, you know, all of that comes back to the cost of doing business. Next slide. This is just a continuation, but again, from you to your safety and quality representatives, all the way down to the sweeper, the whole team needs to understand we're here to do a job. We're here to do it right. We're here to do it in compliance with the specifications and compliance with the applicable codes. And if something is another unforeseen condition, for instance, we're working on a job now and they have to replace the ceiling. So when they took the ceiling down, there are electrical boxes up in the ceilings that don't have covers on them. And that's a pre-existing condition, but we will never get that ceiling inspection, cover-up inspection completed without those covers on there. So they had to bring that, we had to, you know, bring that to our attention. And that obviously is going to be, you know, not a huge change order, but it's we have an allowance in the project, so it really won't be so much a change order as it will be approval to use some of that allowance to go fix those conditions that no one knew were there until the ceiling came down. But everybody on your team needs to, you know, be on board with that. Excuse the doorbell. I got spring breakers all over the house. Next slide, please. All right, measuring project performance. Again, we talked earlier like about the dashboard. This is key. You know, it's almost like at the end in that fifth step we talked about just before closure, monitoring, control. You know, obviously at the end of during the project and definitely at the end, you want to come out on the plus side. You don't, you know, this second bullet really is asking the question, are you in the lane that you're comfortable with and that you've had success in? And before you move into another lane, does it make sense for your company? Do you have the right skill set? Do you have the right training? None of this says, don't do it. All of these could be indications that you're in a position of growth and you need to get to the next level. You need to be able to address these issues versus just, you know, stay at a certain level, doing things with the minimum amount of resources. And there's not an unlimited amount of money, but you know, you can look at different ways to incentivize your people and your staff. And particularly if you have a good accounting partner when it comes to bonuses and things like that, where you can make sure people are valued and they feel valued by how they're compensated, how they're communicated with, and how their talents are being used to help you and help the business grow. And at the end of the day, was the owner satisfied with the project and how you communicate it and how you manage those 5 phases? Next slide, please. Again, I talked about quality, and then again, I talked about the safety and maybe the need to have a dedicated person. You know, one of the things that I think I kind of suggested to Cliff is, and just kind of parrots what Hebrew just talked about, is these aren't necessarily people that you have on your payroll. These are people who could be consultants to you and that you put in your price proposal, and you know, you have a little markup on their costs because you've got to pay them and you've got to communicate with them. You may have to get them added onto your email server so that they can communicate on your platform. And so that when they're communicating with the customer, you know, it's not their company talking to the customer, but it's it's your company. So, you know, this whole thing on safety, OSHA's big. That could get you shut down, that could get you kicked off the site. But generally speaking, the safety person is, or the role of safety, that person needs to have that competency. They can be on your payroll. Sometimes the contract may dictate that. And if it dictates that, generally they're going to pay for that. Meaning that it's going to be, the owner expects a cost for that because safety is important to them to the extent that they want to dedicate an individual to be accountable for that. Next slide. And the big thing for all of this, for all of your success as a project manager, as a business owner who manages projects, this is maintaining the relationships. Everybody is not necessarily your friend, but you have to have a line of communication with everybody. And you can agree to disagree, but what's in the contract is in the contract. What's on the drawing is on the drawing. And, you know, no one has the authority to interpret that other than the owner. So the subs, if you're the managing general contractor, if you're the owner's rep, you've got the general contractors, the subs, even the people who design the work, they may have screwed up. There may be errors on the drawings, but you have to approach that as you need them and they need you to be successful. One of the ones that's real hard to manage are the inspectors. Sometimes they could care less about anything other than this doesn't meet code. And you're gonna have to tear this out to satisfy me. And that's a relationship that's very critical. And there are all kinds of stories I think everybody can tell about inspectors. But again, that's a relationship that's critical to your success. And more than anything, it's the customer, is keeping them aware of what's going on, not underselling or overselling. And again, being able to let them know what's ahead, to keep them from being surprised. Often, even if you have bad news, you know, you often say, hey, we have a problem here. I have a solution in the works, but I think you need to be aware of this. If your team owns it, they own it. You may say, hey, I've done a lessons learned. We've done a all hands on deck meeting. You know, we've done these things to mitigate it. So you want to convince the customer that the success of their project is important to you, and that you have instilled the discipline and concern on your team to get the job done right. And obviously you got to keep amongst all of this, you have to keep looking over your shoulder, because the better you do, your competitors aren't just going to sit there and say, oh, just let them have all the work. They're going to sharpen their pencils and be more competitive. They may try to still keep key members of your team. They may underbid work just to keep you from getting it. And if they do get it, that's bad for them if they aren't as competent as you are. But there are all kinds of techniques people use, fair and unfair, to compete. And I think that's the last slide.
Yeah, I think that is as well. Go ahead and run through that if you want to.
So what I had sent out earlier, team, were 2 articles. There's no test. Of the 2, the one I want you, now that you've heard my conversation this evening, the one I want you to spend the most time with is number B, business acumen and business spirit. Because one of the things that is key with project management is that people representing you and yourself have to demonstrate that you want to be there, that you want to succeed. No one wants to be in a project meeting or a business meeting and it looks like you feel and your body language communicates like it's the end of the world. And that's the last place you want to be. The dynamics of the project are so high wire, generally speaking, that it won't tolerate that, and people will lose confidence in you. So there's a couple key things I want you to pick up out of this article. One is the term situational awareness. And one of the things what that really means is that you have to be in constant evaluation of the situation and being aware of what the next steps are going to be required to fix that. Let's say you're in that meeting and somebody identifies a problem, but they don't really expose the magnitude of the problem. So from a situational awareness, when in my early project management days, I said, hold up, wait a minute, blah, 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 blah. You got to do this. The key for that may mean from a situational standpoint is like, hey, Mark, can we have a sidebar after this meeting to discuss what that item? So what you've shown is that one, you caught it. Two, is that you want to talk to him about it. And the owner or the owner's rep has seen you take that leadership. So that's that situational awareness. So you could blow that up by digging into that whole, and sometimes it may be required, is digging into that whole hornet's nest right there in the meeting. Or you could, in the approach I just talked about in this particular situation, your situational awareness say, hey, I think there's some stink there. I'm not gonna, pull all the covers off now and see what's there, but I am, from a situational awareness standpoint, going to let the team know that I'm aware of it and that I want to get to the bottom of it, and I have enough acumen to not destroy the meeting for that one thing, because there could be multiple things from different, from the plumber to the HVAC to the finishers to the drywall. I mean, they're all kind of depending on how big the project is. So that term situational awareness is there. And even though there are 5 phases of the project in general global terms, there are really 3 components to project management. There's 5 phases. And now I'm talking about components, and that's discussed in the article. That is the physical work to be done is a component. There's the technical nature of the work. And then there's the legal aspect of the work. And legal means the contract, the specifications, the safety codes and compliance, the quality codes and compliance, that can all put you in legal jeopardy if you're not looking at it from a, I'll call it a 3-pronged stool. And you kind of take those concepts with you. And, generally when they're from a small business, if you were a carpenter and you were running about $100,000 a year, and now you've grown to, $10-12 million annually, your tie to the physical work isn't as much now because you've got 5 crews running all over the place. So you're not, and the technical nature of the work is there, but now you may have to concentrate a little bit more on the legal work because you got to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. But that doesn't eliminate you staying close to those 3 components and being cognizant that those are got to be with you all times. The physical work that's required, the technical nature of it, which is the technical specifications, the drawings, and then there's the legal aspect of it is what are your obligations to deliver to the customer, and are you in jeopardy of falling short of those? Situational awareness and the 3 components. One last concept in Article B that I wanted to talk about, there's a concept here of benefit engineering, which really comes in on change orders and when you run into situations where you've been asked to do more or you've identified that there's more to be done, and how you present those to the customer. And that's really the issue is if they've come to you and say, hey, I want you to do this extra work, you really need to put yourself in the mindset of how can I present this back as a benefit? Meaning you want me to do the work, I'm on this site, and I want to charge you X for that job. But before you present that to the customer, you need to shine that opportunity up from a benefit standpoint, meaning I'm here, that's a benefit. I'm aware of the work conditions, that's a benefit. I can deliver it on time and on budget, and that's a benefit. And I know I had the relationships to bring in, give you a superior price and schedule on that. So you gotta think of that like versus here's my number, take it or leave it. That destroys relationships. So you always have to be thinking, and even when you discover things on your own that you need to present to the customer, you're saying, you know, that hot water heater is really at the end of its life. And while we're in there, it would be the right time and cost you less to have me do that work now than you wait, 3 months from now and the thing stops working and your water pipes bust and you don't have drainage in that space and it's going to flood and, so forth and so on. So that's the whole benefit versus say, you got a problem in there, you need to get that fixed. Well, you need to develop that buy-in. Hey, there's a benefit to let me handle that for you now versus you wait and there are more severe consequences down the road. So Article B, take a little time to read that. It's not real dense, not a whole bunch of terms, but that's situational analysis, benefit engineering, how to think about solving problems as a benefit to the customer. And then the 3 components to project management, the technical aspect of the work, the physical aspect of the work, and the legal aspect of the work. So with that, I am done, Mr.
Well,
Dixon.
Mr. Mangum, just everybody, let's give a thumbs up, a round of applause. I mean, that was an amazing overview.
I have
And
one question.
yeah, the end was so strong. Before we get into that, family, what I've heard tonight is something I really want to just let sit a minute and let's have some conversation about, because this right here, from a pure bond perspective, when we talk about bonding, and that's what we're here to talk about in the aggregate, right? This right here makes or breaks you. The things that Mr. Mangum talked about, really, because at the end of the day, you get a bond because you have a project, right? And you get another bond because you made money on that project. But if you have some gaps and holes and bad relationships and those kinds of things, so this is what I offered this evening, because I was excited about my half of the presentation, and I know it's getting late in the hour, but I really want to have some conversation with you guys tonight about project management. And your views on it, some of the challenges you may have, some of the lessons learned as a team of the bond education program class participants, to have just a few discussion moments about it while it's fresh, right? While there's a couple of questions we saw, while it's fresh in your mind, the things that Mr. Mangum talked about in Article 2, huge, right? If you just sit back and just walk away for a moment and come back to it, that's huge. That's a success tool that you should have in your toolbox. But I'm offering that we can do my piece in the next class, that we want to just spend some time today kind of bouncing around the project management, because I want to make sure you ask questions and we answer them in this context through the lens of project management as it relates to not so much being a project manager, right? Obviously, that you guys get that. Most of you probably get that, but the lens we want you to kind of look at is as a business owner. How does this look? How do you feel about it? Or do you have flat spots? And the best thing that you can benefit out of this conversation this evening is to see where the holes are in your operation. See where your holes are, because the holes will be where the money drops out, one way or the other, right? You didn't do the engineering on the change order side, right? You didn't think about it enough, so you put a price in, it was too low, right? Or you didn't think about it enough and you inherited risk that you didn't need to inherit it, and it ultimately impacts your bottom line. So I want to stop talking, and if you guys are okay with that, and just have some conversation, we'll look at the questions. And Mr. Mangum is here. He has a wealth of information, over almost probably 35, 40 years of experience in this space, and a lot of different views of things, which gives him this amazing spirit and openness about his experience base that he can share with you this evening. So our question we had is 2 questions right now. We said, should you penalize subs who miss meetings? I think it's a great question. Mr. Mann, you want to take a shot at that?
I think that penalizing is a strategy. I think the key thing is, why aren't they there? And if the meeting is critical and they can't participate, then again, we talked early on about time to, I don't know if I got it right, fish or cut bait. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but the penalty may mean you're off my team. And because the meeting, if they aren't there or have someone with enough knowledge of the project scope that they own to communicate to you, that's a problem. Now, if they sent their report in writing or they called and sent an email, I think you can work with that. But just an absence penalty is out there. But when I talk about penalty, you got a job to get done. You need people to show up and show out. And if somebody's sliding in that area, you need to really evaluate, because when you start doing penalties, the only way to really do a penalty is to hold back money. And then that gets into a whole nother avenue. And if you want, and you don't have time to play that game, so you might be better off without them.
Right. And, the other side of that conversation is, and Ron spoke to that, relationships, right? So if you have a sub that really values the relationship over the project, and maybe you've done historical business with them, maybe it's a new one, maybe there's some future business. And then the other side is, did your team communicate, call in advance if there's a meeting, who's all coming? Did they get an email response? There's a couple of, he just don't show up. Obviously, maybe a reason, right? But I think that Ron talked about, the situational leadership that he spoke to is kind of how you would have to look at that, right? Is that a situation you want to do that in, or or not, obviously. So that would be, anybody have any dialogue on that? Now's the time. We're going to spend some time talking tonight, because I think we're at the point where we need to have some conversation with you about, bottom line issues, capacity issues. And this is definitely a focal point we want to kind of put out there tonight to engage. Okay. I'm hearing, I don't see anybody speaking up to that. So going back to some of the things that Ron talked about, does anyone have any questions? We've got a wealth of information. Anybody have any maybe lessons learned, some best practices that you've experienced in that space? Anybody?
I have a question on pricing project management work, and especially in an area where you're not sure how big a team you're going to need, and you're trying to put an agreement together. What's a reasonable way to approach that? What size team would you anticipate? How do you cost it out in an agreement up front? Do you leave that open for?
You want to deal with that a little bit, Ron? You want to jump in?
You understand my question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, okay. I guess I'll jump into it. form follows function, right? That's what they teach in architecture school, right? Form follows function. So if you are a really tighter on what the scope is, right? You know that's the first thing, particularly in new agreement, to making sure that you know the scope. And sometimes the scope is one thing and owner's expectations is another, right? Particularly if they're new in what they're trying to do, they don't know the questions to ask. So all that being said, the project management level of costing really depends upon the sophistication or technical or physical sophistication and challenges and risks that project represents. So if you have a project that's, no risk, bathroom change, you're gonna move some walls around, you gotta deal with some electrical, not a big deal. If you've got to relocate a chiller and evaluate the structure and you're working over live folks, so all I'm saying is you got to really understand the scope and the risk, and therein lies the reward. And then you can look at the market. Project managers in a 1099 way could run $80, $90, $100 an hour, right? Depends on what you get. And I would say that one of the key things is to as I mentioned before, know what the expectations are. Don't make it personal, right? Don't make it emotional. Write a scope of work for that project management, because one of the benefits of kind of out of post-COVID or however we are right now is there's some people on the bench, right? There's some people on the bench, and the way this technology runs, LinkedIn and all this other folks, if you have enough time, write an aggressive scope of work that delineates everything. Now, some people do that opposite. Some people just say they write a loose scope, saying get more for their money. I don't prescribe to that strategy. You want to know up front what you're dealing with, and then put it out in the market and see, who's out there, what kind of skill sets do they have, what's their experience base, where they use those skill sets. And then the market will tell you. You can go online and say project management fees, you'll see from $70 to $200 an hour. It just depends. But again, you've got to manage that risk as best you can. So the other thing I would counsel you on is that in many cases, sometimes relationships, as Mr. Mangum talked about, are great. But in the project management world, you may have a relationship that they call themselves a project management person, but they may not really, in an execution way, be able to perform in a way that you need them to perform. So again, going back to knowing the structure, knowing the issues, knowing the customer's expectations, written and unwritten, and then a tight scope of work, and test the market. Again, I just test the market, see what you get. You'll be surprised at what you'll see. And then you'll be able to make a decision based on empirical, information. You've got data, right? You've got a resume that says they did this, and this. And then lastly, all that being said, you want to kind of do a litmus test with your client on the budget side, because you may need a project management person that is $150 an hour because you've got some tough issues, but you're dealing with a nonprofit or maybe someone that doesn't have a lot of budget. So you want to have that discussion up front, that these are our challenges, these kind of skill sets, we need to have them. Yes, we have a relationship, but this is what your project says it must have to be successful, to make sure that they can afford the kind of folks you need to be successful. I know it's a long question, answer to the question, but it was a great question. Yeah.
Well, I thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I have a question as well.
Sure.
Yes, so I need to get your input. Considering running a business or running a construction company, mostly as a GC with a lot of subcontractors, the project management style compared to when you are performing most of the task. And then, the other approach may be to have a hybrid model where you have quite few subcontractors, but also you perform some of the task. So I'm asking that question, we are evaluating how to get into construction. Mostly we are an engineering firm and we have already the contractor license. We're talking to the bonding companies. But then we have, on the table, do we want to focus on being mostly the GC with a lot of subcontractors, or do we want also to be self-performing? And the project management style for both can be different. So I want to hear your insight on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's probably all of us had to ask that question to ourselves at some point in the growth of our company. And the real point and answer is this: when you execute work, you don't want to try to do that on your first rodeo. You want to try to make sure that you have some level of expertise and demonstrated expertise, whether you have hired that in, whether you've done it yourself. Because the challenge with starting in the labor side of the things is that, just like I talked about, I call them, for not any derogative way, but I saw professional services from an engineering project, when you got craft services. They're both very important. You just gotta know that they're doing the right thing. The other side of that is that how do you manage your cost? Because that's the one thing, probably if you ask questions, it may be the most important thing in a view of a project from start to finish. What usually goes bad is people burn labor early. Either didn't manage the labor in the field because they don't have the right skill set out there pushing the buttons, or as Ron talked about, one sub did something crazy because probably to his benefit, let me get my guys on and out, where it ended up costing you more labor. So, you've got to really take a step back and make sure that you get into the right space. And Ron talked about that. Where are you comfortable? And maybe, when you look at your management team, maybe you look at, okay, in the GC market, I know I have relationships, I can get this money. Crawl before you walk, and make sure you get some small projects you can learn from. If you really want to get in a long-term relationship with construction, and in the context of not I want to be in construction, not I love construction, but how much I can make that drops to the bottom line. How do I manage my risk in that equation? Because you can love it for the first couple of years until you start losing a bunch of money, and then it becomes the worst thing you've ever done. You start to hate it. So my counsel is this: one, look at it very closely and make sure that that's the lane you want to spend in. Two, make sure that you understand the variables in that lane. What are the variables that impact that lane? Whether it's your skill set, whether it's the subcontract skill set. Three, know the legal side of either subcontract relationships or self-perform relationships. And then four, whether you do one or the other, know your cost in the context of your self-perform side. Because there's some great even on the call tonight, we've got some construction folks, we've got some design folks, and I heard design build in the conversation. So, and that's a delivery method that's becoming more and more used because they say it saves money. Some people could argue that point. Long answer to your question, but a great question. Mm-hmm. And you want to walk away from that a minute. Get your leadership team. Look at the SWOT. Do a SWOT, right? What is my opportunity, strengths, and weakness? What does that mean? And then see how that maps out. But is to make sure in the context of growing that you manage your growth and you crawl. Now, honestly, the challenge with that is that as you crawl, the revenue is less. But I'll tell you that if you begin that, you'll be able to fix some things in your organization, particularly if you grow into a different organization from a design to construction. Trust me, it's a totally different world from a design management and the risks of designers to the risk of construction. So if that's where you want to be, do a 2 or 3 or 5 year plan and see how you get there, and see what you got to do to make that 7 year pop for you, that 5 year pop for you, because you did the right things in year 0.5, 1.5, and 2, right? Sorry, long answer, but great question. Anybody else? Time's now. Goodies on the table. And this is why you're here, to try to figure out how you keep your money, how you get the retained earnings to be what you should be and what you anticipate, because the bonding company's going to look at that at the end of the year and they say, where's your money? How much money did you make? Okay, you said you make 5% this year. Why'd you make 3%? So your bond rating drops, you get less of a bond, right? So, this is where, and again, you guys are veterans, right? This class has got some strong folks, and it's a great environment to be in. So if we're saying things that just work with us a minute. You may get one nugget out of it that may save you some money. Anybody else? I know it's about
The
9:30.
strategy, as we grow the company, because you find some people, you grow the construction company, you are even a couple million, 10, $20 million. And at some point you go out of business. I know people who have had success in construction, but then they go belly, and then they go back even to find an employment working for someone. So is there maybe a strategy that one should be using so that you can taking out money progressively? As you make money, you take money out, or you do other strategies so that even if things don't work out or something happened 5, 10 years down the road, at least you can show something that you got from the business.
A great question. I mean, it'd be, my only caution there is that that's easy to do, right? Because you could get in some very lucrative projects. And I've had a few, and I've had a few that went upside down. So I've had both of those experiences. So my counsel is this: if that is part and parcel of your business plan, is that your business strategy? That means what? If you made some money, then if you're an LLC, when it's time to have distributions, you put that money in an employee call investment, right? So you can make sure that you've got some rainy day funds, and don't spend everything. The other side, from a pure bond perspective, they really don't like that. Bond companies don't want to see the profit of the business going somewhere else, with maybe an exception of a low risk investment piece that can be liquidated if there's an issue, or they may have some kind of first right of refusal from it based on them providing you a bond, and how do they manage their risk. So, but I've heard stories of that contractors make a lot of money, and that they pull it out and they try to do something with it, or buy something on that on the luxury side because they made a good piece of change on this project, and they see this cash in the bank and think it's their money. Well, it's really not. It's the company's money, and you're responsible to either your partners, your stakeholders, and if you have a bond, you're responsible to that bonding relationship to say, I mean, I've known people that did exactly what you said. They pulled out the money and the bond company dropped them. They dropped them. They couldn't get a bond. They couldn't get a project because they bought some buggies, right? Some expensive cars or whatever. Again, long answer. Make it part of your business strategy. Make it make sense in your business strategy. But I would counsel you this: if you do something like that, do it in a way that it's an investment tool and not a business of luxury, a lifestyle, if you will. You've heard that conversation. You have a lifestyle business, you have a business. Lifestyle business means I make money, I'm spending. I need a new car, I need a new truck, I need a new house. All those things are wonderful. But that's year 20, year 15, right? Not year 1 or 2 or 3, because you're still investing in your company. So consider that. You do what you want. Obviously, you're making the best, the call that you need to make for your own. But if you're making enough money to put it away. But you're probably gonna find somewhere to spend that to invest in software, training, relationships, those kinds of things. So consider that. No, long answer. Love the stuff. So I get talking too much. I apologize. Any other questions? Now's the time. No, we can ask questions anytime. I'm teasing. We're here for you. But we're at the part of the program where you've heard a lot of stuff, right? You heard all kind of good stuff about cash and bonding and insurance, and so we want to make sure that some of this sinks in, and that you start putting this to use in your businesses. Some of these techniques and what have you, as best you can, because many times I've done these classes, family, that this stuff gets really good on the table, and they close the book and do what they do before, and then perhaps may not be as bottom line successful as they could have been if they engaged some of the things that people like Ron and others who've got this immense reservoir of knowledge, and they're sharing it with us this evening and other evenings. Anybody else? Any questions? Any questions? I know it's 9:34 on my clock. Well, 8:34 on your clock. Okay, so if you do have questions, right? You wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a question I should ask. Email us tomorrow. Or you think about it the next day, email us, and we'll do our best to get that answer to you. So we want to again thank Ron. I call him Mr. Mangum, but I know Ron for a whole many years, but he's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
He's a wealth of information. He pulled it out for us this evening. Let's give him some more love. Oh, there's one. Thank you, Miss Intern, Miss Ashley. She got a little pop-up things. I didn't know how to do that, but that's cool.
I don't know how to do that.
Me either.
Yeah, I know, but she's an intern. She's college. She probably can ring rounds on the technology side. So, but that's why she's here. That's great. So let me turn the page. We thanked Ron a couple of times. Can't thank him enough for what you got. You guys, this is such good stuff for you. So again, use it. But let's turn the page. We want to begin to continue, I guess, to have the conversation about audit, right? We want to make sure that you have availed yourself of all the resources that are provided, and that is engaging some of the questions. Ron was clear, it's not homework, but it's good business work. The nuggets he gave out, that's some good stuff. So I want to make sure you do that. I think we have all of the names that we've asked you for. We appreciate that. We've got corrections. We've got a list. And those that stuck with us and are pushing through it, congratulations, because you have really done a lot of work and a lot of investment, as we told you at the beginning. So want to do that. The next class is our last official class for the bond education program. Since I put mine on the back burner, so I'll talk about pitfalls in that first part of the class, and we're going to talk about a JV conversation. So next class, you're going to hear some dialogue about how to engage joint ventures and relationships that make 2 and 2 5. That's I always say when I give little talks on this thing. 2 and 2 should always equal 5. What does that mean? The sum is greater than the parts, right? So you think about that concept. So particularly with the projects that are coming out of the chutes and the dots across the country, and the way that the agencies are putting projects out on the street, right? Early in my career, it was design, build, bid, build, right? Basic stuff. So you design something, they give it to the folks, they put it out on the street, and you give a number, right? And then, they call this CM thing came out. And so owners agents came out and program managers came out. Well, fast forwarding to, tomorrow is CM at risk, right? So the CM at risk, they get the number, they take the risk. That's good for the owners in some cases. I don't think it's highly it's beneficial for some of the small businesses because the packaging strategies aren't as intimate as they could be, meaning they're larger. All I'm saying this night, family, is that many of the projects that you see come out in the dots in the cities will be done with CM at risk. And you have to, even when you break packages down in the CM at risk world, so a drywall package could be $20 million, could be $10 million, right? So you want to consider, if you look at those folks who came and shared that evening for procurement opportunities, the state, the city, the airport, how do you really compete with that? And what is a good partner for you to compete with? What does that look like? How does that feel? What do your agreements look like? How do they feel? So we're going to talk a little bit about that next week, and then we will conclude the every other Thursday class. We're almost home, but we're not done. So when we get done with the classes, we've got this thing we're working on you with our stakeholders, where we're going to celebrate your success. We were blessed to be able to have an environment coming up in a month or so Well, we're planning it now, and you guys are going to be an integral part of that agenda from a view perspective. And we want to make sure that all the primes and all the folks know who you are, what you do, and that you know, they'll see this experience called graduation and certificate giving, whether it's virtual or semi-virtual. So we're going to market that as we promised you that we would. So, you know, unfortunately, that date has slipped back a little bit because of COVID, some other things. But I think it's going to be wonderful because we're going to still be together, you know, for a year or so. That's always our plan, to engage you in either one-on-one consulting, or maybe you want to talk to Mr. Mangum about some stuff. Maybe you want to talk to David. Maybe talk to Lee and his team. So we're going to kind of look at that as we move forward. Do I have any questions this evening for anything that we said or past environments that we talked about? I know it's a long day for you guys. Going once, going twice. Before we go, you're right, Nike.
Nikki,
Thank you, Nikki. I'm sorry, I knew that. I really knew that. Procore is excellent. It is excellent. There's a couple other softwares out there. That thing is a beast, and to use it, you got to be good at it, and that usually takes some training and some you know, some trial and error. So those things are great, but you want to make sure that you are proficient in it, and that does have some kind of investment as a part of that being efficient. Gone, right? Last one, gone. So we thank you, Mr. Mangum. We thank you. Oh, wait a minute. I did 5 new messages. I missed one?
no, we want to ask all the participants to go into the chat and click on the link to complete this class survey.
Yay, that's right. Way to go.
And that was Miss T. Elaine Williams was the person who wrote in that Procore is excellent.
Wonderful.
And we have new, yeah.
Well, we thank you. She's always giving some nuggets like that.
Yeah, she does. She made another comment. Procore has modules.
Sure it does.
I learned it easy. Their call support is great, she says.
Wonderful. All the programs have modules. You're right. Yep. Thank you for that, Ms. Beth. And so any others?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
Can we do a class on takeoff? We did an excellent class on estimating, but there's a next step on project takeoffs. Is that a possibility?
It sure is. Yeah. You know, one of the things that we've done in the past, when we, and in particular in this COVID world, if we can't travel, you know, we may just do a session just on that, right? So that's the short answer, is absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. That estimating is, that's why I started my career in estimating, so to talk about it for 2 hours is like tough, but it's a big picture. So yeah, absolutely. Ms. Beth, could you make sure I don't lose that?
I have just noted it.
Thank you so much. Family, any other questions? Okay, my last thing for this evening is this. Why don't you share with us, so we can make sure we have this invite list that I talked to you about, is any primes that you have worked with in the past, right? Any prime contractors or large subs that you've worked with in the past. We like to make sure that they're on the list, because the list that we're going to use is the typical list that comes out of TDOT, the city, county, airport. But some of these folks that you may work, they may not be those folks. So we want to make sure we get that information from you. And even in as much as some owners that you have a relationship with, that you may want them to, because Ron talked about this thing about relationships, that if nothing else, if they don't feel that being in this environment that we're doing with the stakeholders, we can definitely send them a creative email that talks about the success of the bond program and highlights you guys in that process. Fair enough? Thank you, team. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Ms. Janice. We thank you all. Mr. Mangum, again, thank you so much for what you do all the time for the USDOT program. Ron's been with us in a couple different rodeos, so we appreciate it. And then lastly, guys, we want to thank our stakeholders. We always thank you guys for participating. Give a shout out to the stakeholders. Saying thank you in webinars is cool, right? That's great. But those are the folks who empowered us to be with you. And we are blessed to be able to do that. Send them a note if you think there's some value, so they'll know, because they're the ones who will have the projects, right? Relationships, right? So again, thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you.